And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink Podcast. My name is Brendan Deek. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also rate the podcast and review the podcast wherever you do listen to your podcast. It would also be greatly appreciated. We are talking strictly Philadelphia Eagles today with a guy I've been wanting to talk to for a very long time. Really excited for this one today. I am joined by Reuben Frank. He covers the Philadelphia Eagles for NBC Philadelphia. Reuben, how are we doing today?
Doing great. How you doing?
I am doing well. Can't complain at all. It is Tuesday, and we are talking some birds today. Before we do that, I want to learn more about your come up and how you got to where you are today. Reuben, why don't we start with this one? Did you think that you would be a Philadelphia Eagles writer for NBC Sports right now, maybe 15, 20 years ago?
Well, I don't think NBC Sports existed yet. So
yeah, good point. Let's say, did you think you would be a very well-known Eagles writer by this time, 15, 20 years ago?
I'm not sure how well-known I am, but it really was, I started covering the Eagles in 87 for the Burlington County Times, Bucks County Courier, Doylestown Intelligencer, Dawkins newspaper. So I did that, and I was still covering high schools and doing both because when you're at a small newspaper, you got to do everything. And, so I covered high school basketball, which I love, and track, which I love. So I started there in 87, the middle of the 87 season. We made a change. Actually, Phil Sheridan became our columnist, Phil, who later was at the Inquirer and ESPN for years. And lives 3 miles that way, and still a good friend. So Phil got promoted from Eagles writer to columnist because our columnist got fired, and they asked me if I wanted to cover the Eagles. So that was October of 87, and I'm still doing it. So the only change really is that I went from the Burlington County Times to Comcast Sportsnet, which became NBC Sports Philadelphia a few years ago. So it's really, I've been doing this half my life. So. Yeah, more than half my life. That's crazy. I never really thought about it that way.
now it's all coming together right now on the podcast. Like, man, I've been doing this for so damn long. Did you grow up in Philadelphia area your whole life?
No, I didn't. I moved here after college. My parents had moved here while I was in college in Ohio, Ohio Wesleyan, and I didn't have anywhere to go, so I just moved. They lived in Mount Airy, and I just moved there, and I got a job in Jenkintown writing movie blurbs for a movie, for like a TV guide type thing, writing blurbs about movies I'd never seen. Those little 50-word like blurbs and the TV listings. I had to write those. Okay. It was the worst job. I did that for a month, and then I got a job.
Like the old TV guides, like you get like the TV guides, I think they would come like once a week or something, right? And it would show what's on TV for the week. Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, it was. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it was called like TV Now or something. It was like they were trying to compete with TV Guide, and they had regional TV like guides for every major city. So,
gotcha.
Obviously it was before the internet. This is 1982, and so that's how we found out what was on TV from these little booklets. So they had one for every market. So the movie blurbs, obviously, they stayed the same. So that was my job. I was in charge of writing movie blurbs. It was terrible. That was in Jenkintown, up in Fox Pavilion. I lasted a month there, and then actually before I even started there, I'd applied for a job at the Gloucester County Times in Woodbury, New Jersey. Gotcha. And I got that job a few weeks after I started at the company in Jenkintown, and I started covering high school sports there in 82. I got to cover Flipper Anderson at Paulsboro and some great athletes. Gordy Lockbaum at Glassboro, who was third in the Heisman Trophy balloting. Flipper Anderson, I think for a while held the NFL single game receiving record, 336 yards maybe. So I loved it. It was like I was making no money. I basically was buying my dinner at the Mobil station. They had those little like wrapped up turkey sandwiches, and I had a Mobil gas card, and like I just basically put all my meals on there, like a little turkey sandwich, a little bag of chips, and a Pepsi.
There you go.
But it was like I couldn't believe I was living a dream. I'm writing about sports and enjoying it. So. And then 85, I went over to Burlington County Times up in Willingboro, and I was there till I went to Comcast. So, it took a while to get to the big time, I guess, but it was worth it.
Were you a football fan kind of your whole life? Were you an NFL guy?
No, I really wasn't. I'm mainly like, I grew up as a baseball fan. I grew up playing baseball. I played Little League and, Senior League and American Legion ball, all that stuff. I never went to an NFL game before my first Eagles game, which was Eagles Patriots overtime game in '87 in Foxborough. That was my first football game I ever went to. I went to a couple Stars games.
And was that your first covered game as well?
No, no, it was the first game I ever went to.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'd never been to an NFL game in my life, but I had to start somewhere. But I think it's really helped me that, I don't think you can do this job if you're a big fan. And I mean, I'm a fan of I love the game now, and I've really grown to, appreciate it and love the job. But it's a lot harder to do it if you've grown up as an Eagles fan, because now you're happy, you're disappointed, you're elated, you're crushed, you're devastated. And I don't know. I don't think you can really do the job if you're going through all that, if they lose in the last second or if they win in the last second. So,
yeah.
I didn't grow up here. Yes, where I grew up in North Jersey, in Teaneck, a little town called Teaneck. And then I lived in White Plains, New York. My dad moved a couple times. We moved a couple times. So I went to White Plains High School with Art Monk, actually a Hall of Fame receiver who played for the Eagles briefly. We were on the same lacrosse team in gym class, so that was kind of interesting. Yeah, incredible.
Art Monk, my dad's a diehard Washington, now Commanders team fan, but he was a big Washington fan, so he's got Art Monk somewhere on this wall over here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Probably with Gary Clark and Ricky Sanders. Yeah, I was on the track team with Art. He was a national champion in the 330-yard hurdles. And then he could have played lacrosse at Syracuse. He could have run track, but he played football. It worked out pretty well for him. I've been doing this long enough that I feel like a Philly guy. I've lived here since '82. That's 40 years. Yeah, 40 years September. I'll move to Philly. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on a very long and successful career. Still, best years are in front of you. Why?
Definitely long. Definitely a long career. I don't know about the successful part.
So I'm a kid from just outside Toronto, Ontario. Grew up a diehard Eagles fan. I chose the Eagles because my dad's a Washington fan, like the asshole son I am. I chose the rival team, and I've been a diehard Eagles fan. And I've always loved your work because you've been a stat guy. I've always loved the stats that you throw out. I'm a big numbers guy, big stat head. How did this come apart? Like, why did you focus on stats? But that's kind of what I've always known you for, is you always find these kind of undertucked book stats. Like, you wouldn't find them anywhere else unless Reuben Frank dug them up. Like, how did this all come apart?
You know what? It goes back. Like, when I played Little League, like, I would figure out my batting average in the dirt on first base. Like, if I got a hit, all right, I'm 13 for 40. Like, I would divide it. I'd sit there. I've just always liked numbers.
Yeah.
And then when I started covering track at the Gloucester County Times in '82, and it's like a really big, like, stat based sport. And there were like no records. There were like, nobody kept South Jersey records. Nobody kept like anything, Gloucester County records. So I just started like compiling them, and I got really I think it goes back to that. I just always liked numbers, and I always want to know, like, all right, this guy just ran a mile in 4:11. Like, it's the fastest time since when? And nobody knew. Like, I want to know that. So, and then when I started covering football, stuff would happen. Like, that was like, Mike Quick's 700-yard game this year. Who's the last Eagle with 700-yard games? And like, nobody knew. So I started like keeping track of all that stuff and researching it. And I got all the old like sporting news guides going back to the 70s to try to fill in the blanks. There's no internet. You couldn't look this stuff up.
It was all by hand, baby.
So I still have all my old, like, I kept all the box scores. Man. I had all the box scores going back to I think 78. And I Xeroxed them into miniature box scores, and I took them with me to every game, like, so I could look the stuff up. So now it's easy. Now, it doesn't take much time. You don't have to carry books around with you. But I've always liked numbers, and I want people to know, like, if that's, the Eagles held a team to, 71 yards in the second half, people want to know, when's the last time they did that. So, if that's my niche, I'll take it, because I like providing that info that other people aren't.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick, so I'm not going to give the whole thing away, but you said an article, I think it was like you did do 10 instant observations, which is one of my favorite articles to read every week. You had a Brian Westbrook stat. What was that? What was that Brian Westbrook stat that you had?
Oh man, you're gonna put me on the spot. That had to do with the 2006 playoffs, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
2006 playoffs when he had the back-to-back games with what was 100 and some odd yards and a 7.0 average. He's basically the only person in history to have back-to-back playoff games. And you have to give me the exact number because I don't have it in front of me.
So in 2006 postseason, Brian Westbrook ran 20 times for 141 yards in a wild card over the Giants, and 13 times for 116 yards in a loss for the Saints the week later. That makes him the only player in NFL history with consecutive postseason games with 12 or more carries and a 7-yard rushing average.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, like I do the 10 observations, and we're sitting here in the middle of June, and there's not a lot going on. But I like to do those every week just to, just so people have something every week to read.
Sure.
And I try to put like a couple stats in there each week that, I just sit there and I don't even know. I just kind of just keep looking at different years and stats and games and until something jumps out at me and then see if I can quantify it. But this is what I do in my spell. I don't have any hobbies. I don't play golf. I just sit there in front of my laptop. Like maybe I could find a Jordan Matthews stat here. Let's see what we got. So awesome. It's kind of a time drain, but it's fun.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the Birds. Currently, they were one of the only teams that's been in the news over the last couple of days. We're in kind of the dead zone of the NFL up until basically you guys go to training camp, which is one of the better times when you're covering the team. One of the better times in the NFL calendar. But let's start with the Jaquiski Tartt signing. Reuben, what does he bring to the team? And do you think he, gets a starting job week one?
I don't think so. I'm not the world's biggest Anthony Harris fan.
I agree.
I thought they should have kept Rodney McLeod. I thought he was playing well by the end of last year. I do think a lot of Marcus Epps. I think he's going to be really good. He played well last year in limited reps, but I mean, he's physical, he's smart, he's tough, he's around the ball, he's never out of position. But the other safeties, I'm just not a big fan of. I think Tartt at this point in his career is a depth guy. Anthony Harris played under Gannon in Minnesota. Gannon likes him. It's his second year in the defense. I'd be surprised if Tartt, Tartt, he started 60 some odd games in his career, but he's never really been a full-time starter over a number of years. Mm-hmm. He's an older guy now. He's one of those guys that it sounds great, but when we get to final cuts, we're all going to be like, is Tartt going to make the team? So look, maybe he'll come in and have a great camp, but I think he's a depth move. It's a guy like, let's bring him in. It's not going to cost us anything. We don't have to give him a bonus. If he can play, he'll help us. If he can't, no harm done. Mm-hmm. I'd be really surprised if he's starting this year.
I don't know the stat. I'm wondering if you do off the top of your head. Do you know how much 3 safety looks Eagles played in 2021? Like, is Gannon a 3 safety guy? I can't really remember. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, he was rotating guys the last maybe 6 or 7 weeks. He started, Rodney McLeod's a guy that played like 99.9% of the snaps when he was healthy. And all of a sudden, he was down to like 60, and he was playing Epps and Harris and McLeod, and he was rotating them. They weren't playing at the same time, but he was rotating them, and it worked pretty well. I thought Rodney started playing better. Maybe he's coming off an ACL. It was going to take a while. Yep. I think, look, if you're a backup safety, you better help out on special teams. You better, so at a guy who's in, his 8th or 9th year, is he going to be ready to do that? I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to be too negative. I mean, maybe he'll come in and play really great, but I don't think it's a lock that he'll be here.
Okay, so minicamp finished up. What was it, like almost 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah,
kind of off until training camp. Why don't you give me your overall thoughts of what you saw at minicamp?
Yeah, I hate to. You don't see anything. Like, really, they're going 7-on-7. It was open 2 days to the media, so it was the first Tuesday and then the last, I think it was Friday. So we saw basically about an hour and 45 minutes, half of which was individual, so just kind of quarterbacks throwing to the receivers against air, and the rest was 7-on-7. So it would be silly to draw any conclusions. I do think Jalen looks good. He was putting the ball where he wanted to. Whether that's going to translate into more consistent season in year 3 for him. Who knows? So it's look, I know everybody was tweeting, oh, this happened on this play, and this guy looks great, that guy looks great, but I've been doing this long enough to know that what you see in June really has no bearing on, there's no pad. Once they put pads on, you can kind of start to get an impression of these guys, and that'll be, I think it's July 27th. I think it's the first day of practice down at the NovaCare. So after that, you start to form an opinion, but these guys are just learning the system, learning the offense, learning the defense. I'll tell you what, Jordan Davis is huge. That's one thing you can't, you just can't escape.
And you've seen like how many different athletes going through the NovaCare complex. Like he stood out to you, like he's that big.
Yeah, and he looks good. I mean, he actually looks fitter now than in April, the first time we saw him after the draft. He came in the day after the draft. He's got a nutritionist, and he's got to do that because he's not going to play if he can't get into shape. At Georgia, he could get away with playing 30 snaps because they had like 200 All-Americans. They're just bringing waves of guys in. But in the NFL, there's a 53-man roster. 46 guys are up on game day. So you better be ready to play hard in the fourth quarter. And that's something he never really had to do, play late in games in college. So he looks good. I think he looks better. He looks pretty fit. He's got to keep that going. But, yeah, he's huge. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Like Jalen looked a little different. I thought he looked a little leaner.
There's a picture that kind of went viral. It's like he's got his biceps looks a little more jacked than last year. I think it was kind of going viral around on the sports shows.
Yeah, I mean, that could just be the angle. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, he's always been pretty fit, but he looked good. He's still 222, he said, but it looks like it's a little more distributed the right way. So not that he was out of shape. I mean, you don't run for 800 yards if you're out of shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought he looked good, and you don't want to put too much into it, but he certainly kept throwing the ball where he wanted to for the most part. So that was encouraging. It was good to see Miles Sanders healthy, and it's such a big year for him. Mm-hmm. And, so we'll see how that goes. I would have loved to see Devon Allen because he's going to be like one of the big stories of training camp.
Yeah.
But he had COVID the 2 days that we were down there. He was there earlier for the rookie camp, but we weren't allowed in there. Back in the old days, we were allowed in everything, mm-hmm. But those days are gone. So they kind of pick and choose when we can go in. But yeah, certainly Devon Allen is going to be fun to watch in camp.
Okay, let's stick with the Devon Allen topic. I was going to ask him about him later, but now that we have him, that he's been brought up, so I was peeking around like Jalen Reagor's contract. Like, what if there's potentially doesn't make the team? Like everyone kind of assumes like, hey, he's maybe a lock because he was a first round pick, and I'm thinking not so fast here. The Eagles would have to eat about $2.4 million off the cap this year if they were to cut him. That's not crazy, okay? Especially from a guy that's gotten a lot of heat in the media, hasn't played very well, and now the Eagles have a loaded wide receiver room. Like you can make like you got AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Quez Watkins, Greg Ward, Devon Allen. Like a lot of teams only keep, for instance, 5 wide receivers. What do you think about Jalen Reagor potentially not making the roster? Do you think he's a lock, or do you think there's do you think there's a potential chance that he's not on the Eagles in 2022?
I think most likely he'll be here, but and look, the cap hit or the dead money is a lot. I mean, it's significant. It's a significant amount, and certainly it's embarrassing when you cut a first round pick from 3 years earlier. But yeah, I mean, from a football standpoint, there's no reason to keep him. Now, I think Devon Allen's a long shot. I mean, he hasn't played in 6 years. He hasn't really played full time in 8 years since 2014. So to think he can come in and, after running track at a world-class level all of the years, think he can come in and change sports. I think it's asking a lot. Obviously, he's in pretty good shape. So, we'll see how it goes. But, and then there's other guys. There's like, Britton Covey. There's other receivers who, will certainly have a chance. Personally, I really think they should cut ties with Reagor.
I agree.
He needs a change of scenery. They need to get him out of here. the cap hit is significant, but how he can figure that out. He's a genius when it comes to the cap. So I think it would be good for everybody. The last thing you need is, somebody gets hurt. Jalen Reagor comes running on the field and just gets booed and drops a pass, and it just gets worse. Obviously, his confidence is shot by the end of last year. I don't think there's, when Nelly was struggling his first couple of years, I really thought, and I wrote this and I said this, like, I really thought there was something there. I really thought.
You could see the talent with Nelson Aguilar. I think Nelson Aguilar had the drop issues, but you could see him getting open. You could see the athleticism. When it comes to Reagor, I go back to the Green Bay Packer game. I don't know if you remember the game that Wentz kept running into people's backs. I think that was the game that Wentz got pulled. Hurts ended up taking over for Hurts ended up taking over for Wentz in that game. The Packers were begging Reagor to make a play. They kept kicking because he was our kickoff returner. They would kick the ball, but to the 5-yard line. They were not kicking the ball out the back of the end zone. They were begging the Eagles' first-round pick from 2 years ago to make a play. That doesn't happen very often. The Packers were laughing at the Eagles for having him as a punt or a kick returner. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah. And that's not a good situation. So that was, see, what I'm afraid of is that he's going to have a really good training camp, and but I don't care what he does in training camp. It doesn't matter. They got to move on from him. And but that cap hit is significant, so we'll see.
That's true. Okay, so you said you didn't really get to see a lot at minicamp or OTAs with the offense, but I think that's what I'm really most curious about for week 1, week 2, week 3, the first couple of weeks is what the offense is going to look like, because we all saw the Eagles completely flip the offense from becoming kind of what Nick Sirianni Nick Sirianni wanted the offense to look like when he got to the Eagles to, okay, let's build around the team's strengths. Let's build around Jalen Hurts. Let's run the football. They completely flipped up. They gave Shane Steichen the play calling. Do you think they kind of go back to maybe what the offense looked like from week 1 to week 7? Or do you think they kind of stick with this run-first offense and kind of see how it goes? Because they've added A.J. Brown. They've got more passing weapons. They're kind of got everything you could want for a passing quarterback. Do they just completely take the training wheels off and say, Jalen Hurts, either be good as a passer or you're out of here? Or do they can kind of continue to maybe play around his running strengths?
Yeah, I think there were some games early last season where they threw too much, even if you had better receivers. So I think it won't be that exaggerated. Nick came here, he wanted to throw, and they just weren't built that way, and it just wasn't working. And obviously I think they'll have the running game in their back pocket this year, that O-line, and they have good backs, whether it's, Miles or Gainwell or Boston Scott. They have good running backs. So I think they're going to run the ball, but I think they're going to run the ball significantly less than last year. You mentioned A.J. Brown. They got Zach Pascal. I think Jalen's going to this is Jalen's second year. He's still 23, but second year in the same offense for the first time in his life since high school. So I think you're going to see a progression from him in the passing game.
Okay.
Jalen Reagor played 736 snaps last year. You think about that.
736 too many.
That's 700. So you think that, and now if you just replace A.J. Brown in that role, how many catches, if everything else is the same, and it won't be, because I think Hurts is going to grow and evolve as a passer, but even if nothing else changes, if A.J. Brown just catches one ball per game that Reagor didn't catch, that takes Jalen Hurts from 61% passer to 65%. Just one pass per game. That's one completion per game. So, I think you're going to see this team throw the ball I'd say maybe 8 to 10 times more per game than they did the second half of last year. I think they understand that running the ball is great to run out the clock and keep the chains moving, but you can't win consistently the way the NFL is right now. You can't win running the ball for 200 yards. You got to you got to get chunk plays. You got to throw it. That's how it's built. The rules. I mean, the way they call it DPI. Everything's conducive to throwing the ball, and I think Nick knows that. So I think there'll be a passing team that runs. I think they'll still run more than the average team, just because they have a great O-line for running the ball and they have good backs. But I think you're going to see a completely different offense when it comes to the run pass ratio and just how they attack defenses.
Rube, if you were a betting man, let's say we put odds at even on yes or no. Do you think Jalen Hurts is a starting quarterback in 2023? Where would you lay your money on if you were to bet right now? I know it's early, but let's say you had to. Let's say we're forced to put $10 on either he is or not.
Well, I don't bet at all, but I think it's more likely he will be than he won't be.
Okay, interesting.
Just for like, what does he have to do? Like, you think about what does he have to do to really win the job? And obviously a contract would come with that. He was at 61% last year with 26 touchdowns combined. And what,
nine drops? Like, there was a ton. Like, there was a button called back drops, right? Like,
yeah,
that Kansas City Chiefs game, what they had like 4 touchdowns taken off the board or something like that, right?
Yeah. And so I think if I mentioned the one pass a game to AJ Brown, I think it's going to be more than that. I think when you look at him at the end of this year, you say he's still going to be just turned 24.
Yeah.
So he's going to be, and you look at some of the the quarterbacks and how long it takes them to get to there. I mean, gosh, Randall Cunningham was the quarterback when I started covering the team. I mean, he didn't make the playoffs till 88. That was his 4th year. I mean, that's typical for quarterbacks. So I think you got to kind of, people have to understand that this is a long process. I mean, Big Red used to say when Donovan was here, he used to say it takes a quarterback 5 years to really master the offense. Mm-hmm. And Jalen's going into year 2. So I think he'll be more efficient. I think he'll be more accurate. I think if he ran and threw for 26 TDs last year. If that number goes to, let's say, one more touchdown every other week, now you're looking at 34 touchdowns. And if he keeps the turnovers down, which he was pretty good at last year, if he's at 66% completion and 35 touchdowns, he's not going anywhere. Because where are you going to find a guy that is better than that? You get the kid from Ohio State, you're probably not going to be able to draft one of the top.
And that's the thing.
Anyway.
There's 5 teams right now that have multiple first-round picks. The Lions and the Texans are 2 of those including teams. There's a most likely scenario, very high scenario, that those 2 teams are above the Eagles, they have a worse record than the Eagles, and if they do have a worse record than the Eagles, they're looking for quarterback.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Although I do kind of like, we'll see. But, so I think it's unrealistic to think that they'll find someone better at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You could go sign a veteran.
I think that's how he would do. I think he would rather go the veteran route than go for a rookie. But again,
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think Howie wants to go with older veteran quarterbacks.
What if Kyler Murray's available? Right? Like, I was thinking of someone around the hit, around.
I think Jalen Hurts is. I think by the end of this year, Jalen Hurts will be as good, if not better, than Kyler Murray.
Okay.
And I don't care for his. I think he'll be playing baseball. I think he might be playing minor league baseball.
You might be onto something there. His attitude this offseason has been very odd.
I don't like his attitude. I don't like the way he played at the end of last year. He's obviously a really talented guy.
Yeah.
But he also had way better weapons last year than Jalen did. So I don't know. I don't think he would go that route. I think it's going to be Jalen, or they'll trade, a ton of picks and get one of the top guys. But I think that's unrealistic. So I think with that $10, I'm going to guess that he's going to be the quarterback. I think everything's kind of pointing that way.
Rube, do you think the Eagles should be the favorites in the NFC East, or do you think the Cowboys still have a little bit of a step up on the Eagles?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the Cowboys, would they win 12 games last year? I think they have to be.
12, yeah.
I think they have to be the favorite.
So they are the betting favorite now. They are plus 105 in the division. The Eagles are plus 200. The Eagles are actually plus 270 going into the draft.
See, I don't even know what that means. I don't. Honestly, I don't pay attention to gambling.
Yeah,
I don't look at it. I don't know who's favored in games. I don't care about that stuff. Obviously, a lot of people do.
1-1 to 2-1 odds. It's not that crazy. It's pretty tight. Compared to when after the draft, the sports books gave the Eagles a much better chance of winning the NFC East after acquiring AJ Jordan Davis and Kobe Dean. It's kind of almost, it's just as close now, where they're saying these 2 teams are going to have very close records.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think obviously Dak is a top 10 quarterback when he's healthy, and Jalen's not. So I think they have he's not yet. Maybe he will be one day. So they have a big advantage at the most important position. I think the rest of the roster, I think the Eagles are probably better than Dallas. You know, the Eagles haven't swept the Cowboys in 11 years.
Really?
2011. So they kind of feel like they got a little bit of a block with the Cowboys. And until they can get past that, I mean, you can win the division without sweeping them, but you can't let them beat you twice. So they got to figure out how to beat the Cowboys. They lose to the Cowboys a lot at home. They got to figure out how to stop that before they can start thinking about the division.
Mm-hmm.
So
the Cowboys have owned the Eagles lately.
They have, yeah. And it's, you know, I mean, you think about Andy Reid, I think beat the Cowboys more than any coach in history. So we've gone from that, and you know, and Doug did pretty well early, but not his last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the big challenge, because certainly I don't think the Giants are any good. Washington's talented, but that whole franchise is a train wreck. So, and who knows what you're going to get from the QB?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be you know, the Eagles and Cowboys, and I think the Eagles have a pretty good shot. I really do.
I want one more question on the team here. Jonathan Gannon, I also think, is maybe the second most interesting person in this team going in besides Jalen Hurts, because they kind of have a similar offseason, right? Howard Roseman said, I'm going to give you everything possible around you, and now you have to do something with it. Jonathan Gannon has no excuses in 2020 and 2022. The Eagles defense finished 25th in DVOA last year. Now, I think they were 19th going into week 18, and then the Cowboys lit us up, and DVOA still put it at 25. So there's some give and take on that DVOA stat, but they were a bottom 12 defense in the NFL, in my opinion.
I disagree, first of all, with that. If you look at they had bad field position all year because of turnovers and because of the return game was terrible. I think they had the 5th worst field position. They gave up, I believe, the fewest big plays and the 3rd fewest or 5th fewest touchdown drives of 70 yards or more. I thought there were a lot of encouraging signs, considering they didn't have any good players. You know, they didn't have any good players.
I feel like that was part of. I don't think Gannon did a very good job of scheming these guys up front, doing creative blitzes. Like, the defense looked really bland. No, like when I was like,
I disagree. I think he did all kinds of stuff that didn't work because he didn't have good players. You know, he's a very good coach, and I think you'll see. Okay. I think they ended up 10th in the league in points allowed. With, you know, Josh Sweat had half a good year. You know, Javon Hargrave had a really good first half. You know, TJ Edwards was solid.
If you look up against Mahomes, Herbert, Dak, like, the good quarterbacks destroyed this defense. Like they beat up on the Simeons and the Daniel Joneses of the world. Like, it was, when you played the good quarterbacks, this defense didn't stand a chance. Tom Brady in the playoffs, like, I get what you're saying.
It's Tom Brady. I mean, he's done that to a few other teams.
Yeah, but
you got to remember, this was. Let me tell you something. Jim Johnson, who is the greatest defensive mind I've ever been around.
I'm an Eagles fan. Jim Johnson, like, one of the goats.
How did Jim Johnson's defense do his first year with Troy Vincent, with Bobby Taylor, with Hugh Douglas, with Brian Dawkins, with Jeremiah Trotter? They were 25th in the league. Because it takes time, and people have to understand that you're not going to come in the first year with other coaches, players, and all of a sudden be like a Super Bowl team. They made the playoffs. I think the Eagles held more teams to 17 or fewer points than anybody else in the league. I think they were tied with Buffalo or second to Buffalo. There were some really good signs. They played the way they played because they had to, because they didn't have elite players. Now you add Bradbury to that. You add Nakobe Dean to that. You add Jordan Davis to that. You add Kazir White to that, who's pretty good. You know, and
so what does this successful season look like for Gannon? Like, so that's what I was trying to get at. Like, they added a ton of talent this year. Like, this defense is on paper 7th to 10th, maybe. You can make the argument in that range if I'm in the right ballpark. Like, does he have to finish in that maybe top 10 defense for him to, I guess, to say, quote unquote, a successful season for Jonathan Gannon?
Yeah, I think more than the numbers is just they've got to get into the playoffs and play well in the postseason. I mean, that's the next step for this team. I'd be surprised if they're not a top 10 defense, but you know how that is. Like you said, like the Dallas game, you know, kind of skews a lot of stats the last day of the season. Yeah. That was, you know, but look, you're going to see you're going to see a lot more from Gannon and from this defense because of who they have and what they have. I think you're going to see a lot of creativity as far as odd fronts and blitzes. And, I think he's going to use different personnel groups. It's going to be interesting how he uses, Jordan Davis and Hassan Reddick and all these new pieces. I think you see a lot of unpredictable formations and combinations. You see Dean at weak side and in the middle. You're going to see TJ Edwards on and off the field. Kazir White on and off. I think it's going to be fun to watch this defense this year. I think when all is said and done, we're going to look back and say Gannon did a hell of a job this year.
I hope so, because I'll be honest, I was a little underwhelmed from him last year. Like, just the fact that he got all these head coaching interviews and like we all thought he was going to be head coach and like he was so highly regarded. I felt like there was a little bit
first year, Brendan's first year.
Agreed. I do like that's why I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. I'm waiting for this year. I felt a tad underwhelmed, so I do think he's a very interesting guy, just because like he's got a lot different around him. He's got a lot to work with. Rube, last question before we get out of here. I'm really curious about this one for you. You've covered the Eagles for a long time. Give me your favorite player you've ever covered, and give me the favorite team. It can't be 2017. Besides 2017, what was your favorite team you ever covered? I'm assuming it's going to be 2015, the last Chip Kelly year, right?
I like Chip. I got along with Chip for some reason. He liked me. I have no idea why, but I think my favorite player that I ever covered was Eric Allen.
Okay. Good
just
answer.
because he was an incredible, I think, a Hall of Fame cornerback. I don't know why he's never been a finalist. I don't get it. He had like 50 interceptions, 9 pick sixes. He had 4 pick sixes in the postseason. I mean, he was an incredible player. But nobody on that team has really gotten the consideration other than Reggie. I think it's kind of a misconception that defense was just Reggie. There were some great players on it, but I'd say Eric Allen. He was the smartest player I've ever been around. I learned more about the game from Eric than anybody else. And you could stand at his locker and you'd ask him about one play. He'd talk about it for 30 minutes, explaining what he saw, what he was looking for, what the quarterback, how he prepared for that play, what he knew the receivers. It was just, and he was funny. He was a great guy. So he was probably my favorite player to cover, EA. And my favorite team, those teams, those Buddy Ryan teams, they were obviously underachieved. They never won a playoff game. But they were really fun. When you think about the personalities, Andre Waters, Wes Hopkins, Seth Joyner, who now works with, I work with NBC Sports Philly, Clyde Simmons, Reggie, Byron Evans, Keith Byers, Randall Cunningham, Mike Quick. There were so many great personalities. Those were really fun teams to cover. Plus, I was just starting out. I didn't realize for a few years how good Reggie White was, because I was like, oh yeah, he had 4 sacks. It's like you just start to cover this thing, and sacks were only an official stat for like a few years at that point. Yeah. And then you look back, you're like, this guy had 21 sacks in a 12-game season. This guy's the greatest player ever. But I would say those teams, obviously they all lost in the play. None of them ever won a playoff game. Although the '88 team had a bye, they won the division. But those teams were probably the most fun as far as personalities, and things were so different then, Brendan. Like Seth Joyner would take me in the film room to watch film and explain, like,
really,
Eagles are playing the Giants. Let's go watch some Giants film. I'll show you what they're gonna, I'll show you what they're gonna do.
That's cool.
We're not even allowed in the building anymore, much less watch it film.
I feel like the beat writer's job, like it just the last couple of years, like man, like it's taken a hit. No.
Yeah, it's really changed, and they kind of use COVID as an excuse, and we'll see if things ever go back to the way they were. But it's been a gradual thing, and it stinks because you don't really have the opportunities to get to know the players the way we used to. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we get some of that back. We don't know yet if we're going to be in the locker room, but whatever they do, it's still the best job in the world. Like whatever they limit. I mean, we're still writing about football, so you can't beat it.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to ask that too, because like I want to grab your insight. You've been covering the team for so long, and this offseason I fell down so many like old Eagles teams rabbit holes. Like the 2008 team, like I feel like they're like that was. I think if there was a year to win the Super Bowl, I know the 04 team they did going in, but that 08 team, man, like they were red hot going into Arizona. And like this Larry Fitzgerald just completely ripped the hearts out of that squad. Like I don't think there was any doubt in my mind that they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl in that year. Like they
had beaten Arizona 48-20, I think was the score.
Yeah, and they beat the Steelers in that same year. They beat both of those teams in that same year. And McNabb was playing some of the best football of his career. The defense was playing really well. Like that 08 Eagles team heading into the playoffs, I felt like was just one of those. It was a missed opportunity. I know there's a bunch throughout the last 20, 30 years, but I feel like that 08 team, there's a little bit of an asterisk beside it.
It's interesting you say that because Dave Zangaro, my colleague, and I were doing a podcast the other day, and we basically asked each other like 20 random questions about the Eagles. And one of them was that he asked me was, what's the biggest missed opportunity the Eagles have ever had? And I said the 2008 NFC Championship game. You know, that Donovan threw a 62-yard touchdown to Deshaun, I believe, with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, that gave the Eagles, gosh,
they went up 25-24. They missed the 2-point conversion.
Right, 25-24. That's
11-year-old me was going bananas in my room.
Yeah, and I was at the game. I was there in Glendale, and there was no question in my mind. We were going to the Super Bowl. Where was it? New Orleans that year? Tampa or something? It was that. I think it was New Orleans.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I think it was in New Orleans.
Yeah. And I think that was a year where there was only 1 week between the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, or the two champs. So we had to pack for 2 weeks. We had to pack for the Super Bowl. So we're sitting there in Glendale, and Kurt Warner drives them down. They had a 4th and 3 near midfield, and I believe Tim Hightower got the first down. Doc, of all people, ran the wrong way. He took a bad angle.
Right? 4th and 1 call. Tim Hightower. Yeah. Brian Dawkins. Honestly, Brian Dawkins, that might have been one of his worst games as an Eagle, to be honest.
It was his last game as an Eagle.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And it was Jim Johnson's last game.
Yep. He passed away a couple months after that.
Yeah, that was so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they got the ball back after the I think Hightower scored, right? He gave him the lead.
Yeah.
This is 14 years ago. I'm doing my best here, but Donovan drove him down to the 50, and then they had 4 shots and 4th down. I'm sure you remember the play to Kevin Curtis, right sideline. Rod Hood definitely interfered with him.
That was pass interference. Yep.
No flag. He kind of tackled him. He grabbed his feet or his legs, and Rod Hood, former Eagle, and that was it. And it was really the end of an era, because that was the last NFC Championship game they got to till 17, and it was. I think
McNabb played one more year, right? And then they traded to Washington, right? That was
they made the playoffs. They actually played well at the end. Donovan had a good year in 09, but then they fell apart in the postseason. But that was the last year they won a playoff game till 17.
Wow, I didn't even know.
Which Howie would always give me a heart. He's like, you really have to keep saying we haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. It's like, I have to do it till you win one.
Got to bring it up, baby.
But that team was really, really good, and I didn't think they had a chance to lose. Obviously, Kurt Warner. Anytime you're facing a Hall of Famer, you have a chance to lose. But I really thought they were going to win that game. Yeah.
Rube, thanks so much for doing this, man. Really appreciate it. I could talk to you forever about old Eagles
Good stuff. Good questions. Appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Yeah, for sure. Let's definitely do it again during the year. Before you go, just let the listeners know where they can all find your work.
NBC Sports Philadelphia. That's our website, and then our podcast is on all the usual Art19 and Spotify, and I don't know. You probably know better than me where it is. Google,
Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, it will be.
Wherever you get your podcasts, it's called Eagle Eye with Dave Zangaro. If you like listening to the radio, I'm on WIP here and there. I think I'm on this Saturday, over at Parks Casino from 1 to 3 with Elliot. Elliot Shore Parks.
Yep.
Does a great job. And Where else can you find my stuff? That's probably about it.
Well, make sure to follow Rube at Rube and
Twitter.
On Twitter.
I'm bad at promoting myself. I got to do a better job with that.
You got to hype yourself up, man. But again, man, thanks so much for doing this. We'll talk during the year, and enjoy. I guess you got a little bit of a vacation time now, and then enjoy training.
I would say one more thing. Yeah, I'm going to Cooperstown. I've never been there.
Okay, cool.
I've never been to the Baseball Hall of Fame, so looking forward to that.
Are you going for the induction ceremony? Or are you just going?
No, I'm just going on a random day. It'd be too crowded on induction day.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm just going to go on a random Wednesday.
Rube, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.